Hello guys, it's Jonas here. Today I'm doing another Beyblade discussion. This time, we're actually doing something on Metal Fight. I have not made a Metal Fight video in a long time, but I want to talk about why I don't like the first season of MFB. So, two things to preface here. First, I'm only talking about the products, not the anime or whatever else, just the products. And also, I know this probably isn't going to be a very popular opinion with saying I don't like the first season of MFB, but I'm not saying it's bad, but I do think that it was kind of just underwhelming, and also there were some missteps that, in my opinion, kind of hindered the entire generation in a lot of ways, which I'll get to, but this isn't meant to just hate on the first season. It's more so just meant to kind of just have a discussion on what I think they could have done a little bit better, and kind of what they should have done here, but, anyway. Two main points to this, and the first one is the system. The hybrid wheel system. So, of course, looking at Storm Pegasus here, of course, have the face, track, and bottom. These are all normal. We had these with the pre-hybrid bays. Of course, when you look at, like, Pegasus here, different face designs, different track and bottom, but the idea is still there. The difference are, well, the wheels. This is just a wheel. This is a metal wheel and a clear wheel. This was a massive mistake. The hybrid wheel system, in my opinion, was the biggest misstep in the entirety of Metal Fight. Clear wheels effectively force bays to have to accommodate them, which basically, in my opinion, just really limits the design potential of bays. When you look at Pegasus here, and even just other pre-hybrid bays that I have, like, El Drago, or Capricorn, or even, like, Quetzalcoatl, these are all, in my opinion, much more interesting bays. I mean, yeah, you could maybe put some more color on them and not just have them as silver, but still, they all have much more unique designs, and I think one really good example is El Drago in particular, which let me point out the design here. There's kind of this, almost like a flame design coming from this dragon, and it kind of goes inward here, like to the face, which I just find to be, like, really cool. But we aren't going to get that on bays like this, because the clear wheel completely just obstructs that. And also, it forces metal wheels to have to kind of just base their entire designs on the outside of a bay. Well, on the outside of the wheel, rather. We saw something like this in Beyblade Burst when they switched to, like, the GT system. But Burst bays were much bigger. They had a lot more room to kind of add on design elements and stuff, which they can kind of get away with that. With this, these bays are much smaller, with clear wheels taking up a lot of the metal wheel space, so I feel like it was kind of hard to get any real designs going here. I mean, look at, like, again, Storm, it's just kind of three basic contact points, and they're really, really small. Dark, I guess, has a little bit more going on, but it's still not that crazy. Flame, pretty basic. Rock also is pretty basic, not a lot here. Earth, very, very small. I mean, there's some special ones here, like, that only were used once, like, Burn, or at least in the first season anyway, Thermal, Killer, Poison as well. These were only used once in the first season. And I'm not counting, like, the game exclusive bays, like Bakuten Susanoo, for example, but these bays, you could just tell, again, the metal wheels are very limited when you compare it to something like a pre-hybrid wheel bay. These are much more dynamic in terms of what they can really do with a design. And, well, I'm not saying that these look bad. They still look good. They're definitely just very limited, though, in what they could do with their contact points and designs, well, to some extent anyway. Like, the only bay that really gets off pretty well is probably Lightning El Drago. But that's because the metal wheel is much different than the the other metal wheels, it's exclusive to being a left spin. It's only used with the El Drago clear wheel. They're exclusive to each other, and because of that, the design is much more unique. And it has room to kind of experiment a little bit. And that's kind of why this bay ends up being much more interesting. So, with that, again, you kind of just end up in this awkward spot of you're forcing these bays to kind of, accommodate clear wheels, and clear wheels aren't worth it, in my opinion. I just think that had they stayed with just a single wheel, you get much better designs and crazier contact points. It would have been much more interesting. I imagine that we would have gotten a lot crazier in like the first actual season of Metal Fight, post pre-hybrid wheel, if they kind of stuck with the pre-hybrid wheel kind of design with just one wheel. Metal Fight Explosion would have been crazy. 4D, imagine 4D bays, but only metal, like for the wheel. Like you could have, the metal wheel, or I guess just the wheel divided, but they're, it's entirely kind of like how it was in 4D, like something like Big Bang had, the core metal frame, PC frame. But imagine something like that where it was just the wheel. There was no clear wheel to accommodate. You could have a really crazy design, even more complicated. I feel like you could have really gone crazy with that kind of stuff if they just stuck to a single wheel. Look at something like Very Aries. That had some gimmicks going on. It was pretty unique, and it was just one single piece for the wheel. And again, with 4D, you could have had divided wheels, but in a sense to where it was, divided for mode changes, and all the parts were self-contained, not to be mixed around like, clear wheels are. I feel like we could have had a much more dynamic Metal Fight had that happened. And I feel like clear wheels single-handedly just sort of limited what you could really do, which I find really unfortunate. It would have been really cool to see some of these really crazy designs happen with just using the one wheel, but, it is what it is, I guess. Also, by the way, I know this is kind of late to mention this, I'm not talking about Zero G in this video. Zero G is its own entity. I might make a discussion on Zero G at some point and what it did, but we're just talking about kind of the more normal part of Metal Fight before it really changed up a lot. But yeah, I think they could have gotten much more mileage in terms of just making crazy designs had they stuck with this instead of going to this. So that said, let's talk about the next part of the video. We're not talking about pre-hybrid wheels anymore. We're just going to kind of assume that we take the LL mats, or I guess you don't have to, but for the sake of the video, we'll just assume hybrid wheel is what happened, as it did. But even though it happened, why was it so boring? They could have done much more with these. So what I mean, so let's take a look at Storm Pegasus. Okay, you can see that it kind of takes inspiration from the original Pegasus, of course, now in this new system. The Storm Wheel is very much a Pegasus thing. Or is it? Because then we have Storm Aquario and Storm Capricorn. Now, we basically don't have to be limited to a wheel to kind of be exclusive to a motif. Now they could just use the clear wheel as that, and they could just throw on metal wheels to whatever. They could use it over and over if they really want to, which they did in this first season. Really bad. Again, all three of these bays had the Storm Wheel. Aquario had 4 contact points. Capricorn had 2. They were not tri-wing designs, but then they were kind of just made into that here because I guess it was just easier. And this isn't an exclusive thing to Storm either. No, not at all. When you look at like the Dark Wheel, again, which started with Dark Bull, but then we had both Dark Wolf and Dark Cancer afterwards. Which, again, all using this. And while we didn't have a pre-hybrid wheel Cancer, Bull was a much different shape, and Wolf was pretty different too. So now they're just kind of brought together almost randomly in a sense. Only 2 Flame bays, but still, Flame Sagittario, Flame Libra. These kind of had some similarities, I feel like, with the pre-hybrid wheel versions, but still, same metal wheel kind of sucks. And then Rock was by far the worst offender of this. Rock straight up has 4 bays like this. Like, what happened here? Why are there so many? But yeah, they made 4 bays with the Rock metal wheel. Rock Orso, brand new to the hybrid wheel system, was not a pre-hybrid wheel bay, but these other three, they all were. Leon, Ares, and Esculpio, they were all pretty different in their pre-hybrid wheel forms, but again, they are now all just using the same metal wheel. We have 4 rock bays, that's just so many. And after that, there are 2 earth bays, which kind of unfortunate, but I guess whatever. It's not as bad. Still kind of weird, but whatever. I mean, earth, I feel like doesn't really match with Virgo that well. I feel like they just threw it on because they already used it for Eagle, but whatever. And then we, of course, did have a few bays that did kind of have their own metal wheel, which was not repeated in the first season. Might have in the second season, but we'll get to that in a moment here. But, again, kind of referring back to these 4, I mean, you had Killer Gemios, Poison Serpent, Burn Phoenix, and Thermal Pisces, which, yeah, I mean, these all were nice, and of course, kind of the best one, in my opinion, in terms of design, being Lightning El Drago. They did pretty well here. But they were all, well, at least a lot of the bays were repeating metal wheels. Well, yes, you had a few that weren't. A lot did. I mean, there are just so many repeats. And also for tracks and bottoms, a lot of these bays are just, like, really, really boring. Like, I'll just throw up, like, a lot of these bays on screen, kind of the underneath. I'll just throw up anything that's just plastic with, like, no other notable features. They're all just kind of here. And don't do anything particularly interesting. So, I would say these, and like Lightning El Drago actually just straight up reused Capricorn's parts, which is kind of weird in my opinion. Like the original Capricorn, which, for kind of this crazy bay, I always thought that was really weird for them to reuse Capricorn parts, but whatever. I'd say these 6 are like the most boring of the bunch. Again, they're just plastic, which, that's not saying that you can't do this, but like, it's not interesting. And a lot of the other sort of more dynamic things, like, you'd think that, okay, the other ones must be a lot better. I don't really think that they are. Because, okay, so Poison Serpent, I didn't count this one. It's just plastic, but you can at least flip this around, which is, in my opinion, not all that interesting. I mean, then you have things like Flame Sagittario, or, Rock Aries. Okay, these parts move, this thing can spin. I mean, it's something, I guess. Earth Eagle, I just think wide defense was really good, and it's still just all plastic, so it's really not that interesting, but I just thought it was kind of cool. Outside of that, though, what else has stuff? Rock Esculpio, Jogged Ball, I guess. I mean, this is like, there's like bumps on this, that's kind of interesting. But these are like the interesting things I'm talking about. Then we had Flame Libra. This one's actually kind of cool, which it was copied by Thermal Pisces, because, again, they copied a lot of stuff here. But Eternal Sharp was really cool. I mean, this part, is free spinning. That's nice. Again, copied over to Thermal Pisces. And you also had Dark Cancer, change 120. I mean, this part you can move up to a 145. That's kind of cool, I guess. Earth Virgo. Gravity Balls, I mean, they move around, I guess. That's kind of cool. Storm Capricorn. Mode change. It moves. That's kind of cool. Storm Aquaria, you could kind of change the bottom to 2 different modes. That's actually pretty cool. I like this one quite a bit, actually. And then we have the only 2 bays to use different material on their bottoms. Storm Pegasus and Burn Phoenix. Of course, rubber flat and a metal sharp. That's it. So I went over every single bay with their tracks and bottoms. Do you think that these are overly interesting? In my opinion, I would say no. I'm not going to fault people for agreeing if you just think that maybe bays are better off being more simplistic. Then I understand your point of view. And that's kind of why I'm definitely trying to say this is an opinion piece, but like, they just weren't interesting, and the problem really comes in with, these don't feel much better than pre-hybrid wheel bays. Again, some combos, like I mentioned with El Drago, this is straight up copy and pasted from Capricorn. These parts don't feel like enough of an evolution from pre-hybrid wheel as they should have been. And that's kind of my problem here. I feel like the hybrid wheel system just ends up being really bland, and I think they could have went a lot further here. but again, they didn't. Even if you stick to the hybrid wheel system and don't really move on a ton, like, look at Metal Fight Explosion, which in my opinion should have been what the first season was. They were much more unique, but they weren't overly crazy either. I mean, they seemed a lot crazier at the time, but really they weren't. But I think it's kind of the stuff we should have been getting in the first season if they did the hybrid wheel system. It's what we should have gotten. So I just picked a few random bays here. There's 7 random ones I picked, and I picked out 5 in particular, but Galaxy Pegasus, this one's very used, but again, painted metal. Also, one thing that they did here was they put more design elements onto the clear reel without any stickers. I mean, the red looks really cool. Underneath, of course, right rubber flat, so rubber, painted metal. I mean, it's just a much more unique looking bay. It looks way cooler. A lot more going on, I feel like. Or not even a lot, but just more going on. Let's look at Ray Unicorno. Okay, a little bit more dynamic. Nothing crazy, but again, something like Coat Sharp, plastic and rubber. That's kind of cool. I mean, there's at least more going on here. Just a couple early bays like Rock Giraffe or Thermal Acerta. Again, really cool design. And while yes, they did reuse thermal, which is kind of unfortunate, there's just, again, it felt like there was more going on with these bays. You know, they're much more vibrant, exciting. I mean, this has a free spin piece, just kind of, why not? I mean, yeah, it reuses thermal, but I just feel like something like this just looks a little bit more exciting, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe this is just me really liking Metal Fight Explosion, but still, I just felt like they were doing more here. And this isn't even like an important release either, it was just kind of there, and it looked pretty cool. It felt like there was much more put into the design, even with a repeated part. Rock Giraffe. Okay, a 5th rock, I'm not gonna lie, that does suck, but hey, Rubber 145, that's kind of a cool track. Again, they were trying to do some new stuff here. Not really, like, that important of a bay, I mean, kind of, it's still. They were, you know, they still were adding some new stuff on. Let's look at Ray Gill. You know, another random bay that reuses a metal wheel, but I feel like this clear wheel is very dynamic, and also rubber semi-flat, kind of a cool bottom. And then these 2 bays, Grand Ketos and Gravity Perseus, and I know there's a dark version, I didn't grab that one, but the whole idea of it being like really light as a defense type is cool. Also, Rubber Sharp's nice, and then like Gravity Perseus, kind of doing the whole El Drago thing. And yes, I didn't even grab Medio El Drago either, but you know, it has kind of the metal wheel and clear wheel locked together to make a much more dynamic design. You got the painted metal, which is extremely used on this one, but yeah. And of course it's LR, which is really cool. And then there's the Maximum series, which you have 5 bays for. I mean, Screw Capricorn reuses Capricorn's motif, but I mean, Screw Wheel has the whole upper attack thing. They try to make a more unique metal wheel. Metal flat's pretty neat. You got, you know, Killer Buffalo. Yes, it reuses Killer, but look at the underneath. I mean, there's a lot more going on. You kind of have a mode-changing track, Upper Wing 145, also Eternal Wide Defense, which brings back the kind of Eternal gimmick on something a little bit more unique, in my opinion. Really, really cool. I like Killer Buffalo a lot. Basalt Herogium, not even that crazy of a combo. I mean, 145 WD, whatever, but like Herogium looks really nice, and also Basalt being heavy. Again, they just kind of were able to market this as like a really heavy bay, and it was the heaviest metal wheel at the time. And that's not like the craziest thing ever or anything, but they were actually putting more effort into each bay, it felt like, and that was kind of cool. I always really liked Basalt Herogium for that, and then of course, Flame Bixus, we're using Flame again, but again, you have a really cool clear wheel, much more dynamic motif, 230, very tall track, very unique bay at the time. And of course, you can't forget Hellcarbix. Kind of had the whole wide thing of being a much larger bay than most, of course, when you compare it to others. And looked really cool. Also had Boostis 145, which kind of lined up with the metal wheel, and really just kind of filled in that gap there. It looks really cool. It's a really cool bay. And while yes, in a lot of ways, this wasn't like a massive one-up on the first season, it still just felt like they put much more effort into each bay to make them at least feel dynamic in some ways. And even if they weren't that crazy, I just feel like in general, again, there was just more put into them. And I feel like this is what they should have just done from the start. the Maximum series, while really cool, and especially at the time, it was crazy, but looking back, it's not overly interesting. I mean, the Maximum series is, well, I mean, it's definitely cool, but like, is it like all that crazy? In my opinion, no. I think this would have made a much better kind of like first season thing than, you know, a second season sort of end of line thing, which it ended up being, which I don't really agree with, but you know. Imagine if we kind of got this level of, you know, quality with them kind of going more, you know, in with the designs and just trying a bit more from the start. And again, having kind of this cool Maximum series idea in season one, which in my opinion it should have been. These weren't that crazy, but they were just better than the really basic base we got before. Imagine you move something like this to season one. Imagine 4D being season two. Imagine kind of a brand new third season pre-Zero G. If they could have really fully developed kind of the hybrid wheel system or something similar, even further, imagine how crazy the base could have gotten and just how much more interesting they would have been. Or if, even if you combine that with like a pre-hybrid wheel idea and you could just kind of forget about what I was saying here, but still, again, with an actual first season, at least make more interesting tracks and bottoms then. We could have had kind of a 4D idea maybe by like the second season using the pre-hybrid wheel system with much more dynamic wheel designs with kind of a divided wheel, but exclusive to said bay, not to be swapped with other bays. And then imagine a third season with just crazy stuff going on. Like, they could have done that, but they just didn't. And that's kind of why I just didn't like the first season of Metal Fight. I just really didn't think it was all that interesting. Again, it just felt really, really bland compared to what we should have gotten. I mean, even like compared to pre-hybrid wheels, I feel like pre-hybrid wheel just had a lot more going on. But we didn't get that. We got, in my opinion, a much worse system because it really just limited the system by, in my opinion, just quite a bit more, but also what we ended up getting outside of just the system itself having the problems was just kind of a lack of a really developed first system or just line of base, really. They weren't interesting enough. Now, again, I feel like you can kind of invalidate a lot of what I've been saying by just simply being like, well, simplistic bays are better, and maybe that's what they wanted to go for. And in that case, you know what? That's very fair. That's a fair argument. But in my opinion, I just feel like these bays are just so lackluster when compared to other generations. Look at the first season of Bakuten Shoot. I mean, you had things like Wolborg with, you know, its bearing core. We didn't get that till season 3 of Metal Fight, you know, with bearing drive. Or look at Burst. Okay, dual layers weren't even that crazy, but there was a pretty massive jump with Beyblade Burst God. And by that point, you know, they were already, in my opinion, eclipsing what Metal Fight did at its peak of, you know, kind of intricate designs, which was, in my opinion, 4D. And that was only season 2. It's definitely been the most boring generation. And while, again, you can argue that they wanted to go for that, and Metal Contact in general does kind of limit design, I feel like they could have still made bays much more, you know, dynamic without going overboard with being complicated or going overly crazy with, you know, its design, but they still could have just done a lot more, in my opinion. That's kind of the point I wanted to get across, which I've probably been going on about for a little bit too long. So I'm going to go and end this video now. If anyone watched all the way through, let me know what you think. Was this a decent argument for some problems I have with Metal Fight, or am I just, like, completely off the mark and it's just not even close? Let me know. But yeah, these are just my thoughts. I've been wanting to make this video for a little while now, and I finally just decided, you know what, let's just make it. So, there you go. So anyways, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.